To measure our metabolism outside the lab, no one talked about it. The correlation between weight and health are not exactly, it's not exactly one to one.
So Lumen is kind of a puzzle. We enable metabolic measurement in a simple breath.
Many people, tend to put the focus on nutrition, and we see in our data that one of the main problems is usually the
Welcome to today's podcast. I'm very honored to have twin sisters with me today. They are the co-founders of Lumen, which is a metabolic tracker. Now we have Michal Mor, who, along with her sister Merav, they both conceptualized the basis of this metabolic tracker, the Lumen, based on over 15 years of research and experience. Now Michal earned her BSc in medical laboratory sciences, her MSc in physiology, and PhD in physiology with a focus on cardiac arrhythmia. Now, Michal is also a dedicated mom. She has 3 children. She is a seasoned athlete and also an Ironman competitor. Now, let's also welcome in Merav, her sister, who also earned her BSc in medical laboratory sciences, her MSc in physiology, and a PhD in physiology with a focus on cardiac arrhythmia. Merav has also extensively been published, has taught biology, physiology, electrophysiology, as well as lectured about her research on T-type calcium channels. So wow, Merav is also a proud mom of 3 children, also a seasoned athlete, and an Ironman competitor. I'm so honored to have you both here today to spend some time. I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions. So yes, I might ask about the motherhood thing as well, how you manage it all, but also, of course, about your metabolic tracker, the Lumen, and how it all started. So welcome on into the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Our background is pretty similar.
It very much is. And I wondered when I was, first reading about you, I thought, wow, I wonder if there's like an error, if there's a typo here. But it makes sense to me because you're identical twins, that everything, step by step, I'm guessing along your life was very similar and you're very attached. And that's so lovely. I love to see that.
I think this is one of the things that help us keep going with
Yes.
15 years of develop that metabolic measurement, and 15 years, that's a lot. You
It
need a lot
is.
of patience, and you need someone next to you that's all the time going to say everything's going to be not just good, everything's going to be amazing.
Yes, I love that. I love that. So can you tell us a little bit about how you first discovered that you could actually measure metabolic flexibility? Tell us a little bit about your background, your story, and how this all evolved.
Sure. It was we were in our last year of PhD. Both of us focus on, as you mentioned, in physiology, in cardiac arrhythmia. And in the last year of PhD, we started to train in an Ironman competition. And for us, it was super clear that we needed to manage our nutrition and our workout and our sleep in order to improve our body engine. Our body engine, this is basically our metabolism. Now, it was almost
15.
even
15
more,
years.
24 years ago, the word metabolism or metabolic flexibility was not a common term. But for us, that coming from research and from physiology, this was a well-known term. But once we started to train, we noticed that all the nutrition guidelines and all the training sessions are really one size fits all. And for us, we thought about, okay, but what defines an amazing athlete versus an athlete that can't even finish the competition? And as I mentioned before, it was super clear that it is about metabolism. But each one of us has his own unique metabolism, and he should train and eat and sleep very different from the other. Even for us, right,
Really?
twin sister, we should do things different. So we started to test different things on ourselves in order to improve our body engine, our metabolism.
For example, we used to train while we are fasting, or then eat like a very, very high, heavy meal after workout at 8 a.m. We try all kind of weird stuff
Yeah.
just trying to manipulate our metabolism and to really train our body to rely on fat stores to provide long-term energy and vice versa to have this very available carbohydrate when we wanted to have like a peak performance in one of our trainings.
And at the end, we did pretty well. We won in the different competitions, but for us, it was like we don't really able to know what moved the needle, because as Merav said, we tested many things on ourselves, but we didn't was able to close the loop to validate what has the highest impact, and those are the things that we should keep doing, and what has the low impact, and those are the things that we can, not put our effort on. So then we decided that in order to even more improve our athletic performance, we need to measure our metabolism and not by subjective feeling. And a metabolic measurement is something that is already being used since the 60s in top hospitals and clinics. But that measurement is not accessible. It's like it's huge. It's in the size of a table. You need to lie down around 45 minutes, covered with something like an astronaut. You need a physician to analyze the data. I mean, not insightful at all.
No, no.
So we was trying to think on how we can take this technology, that measurement, and made it accessible for us. We didn't thought about Lumen or about the company.
We were so focused on ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay, because look what happened, right? That is amazing. So the original technology then was that measuring the CO2 that was exhaled, and then that's similar to your device. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so actually, the physiological principle behind the lumen measurement, the metabolic measurement, if either it's like using the gold standard, as Michal mentioned, named metabolic card, or the lumen device is based on the same physiological principle that each one of our cells actually, when it produces energy, require oxygen, fat or carbs, and produce carbon dioxide. When our body relies on fat to produce energy, it releases less carbon dioxide. It's actually the same physiological principle is the same for the lumen metabolic measurement and the gold standard as Michal mentioned previously. It's based on the fact that when our body uses carbs to produce energy, it actually releases to the blood more carbon dioxide versus when our body rely on fat to produce energy. Now, once we are able to track after changes in the carbon dioxide, we actually can track after metabolic changes that occurs in our body. So Lumen is kind of a puzzle. We took a very known physiological process and we enable metabolic measurement in a single breath.
So to simplify, to make sure that I have it right, so if I'm burning more carbohydrates, utilizing more carbohydrates, meaning maybe I ate more carbohydrates, if I were to blow into the device, it would show that I'm exhaling more CO2?
Exactly.
Is that right? And then
Exactly.
versus fats, if you're actually burning more fat, and this is where I know a lot of people, because they probably use your device for weight loss. So if they're looking for weight loss to actually be able to access their body fat, then the lumen would register a lower CO2 that's exhaled, and that's how you can get different readings on the device. Is that right?
Exactly. But
Okay.
it is important to say that when people want to lose weight, what will enable them to achieve that is that their metabolism will work efficiently.
Yes.
Now, efficient metabolism, flexible metabolism, doesn't mean that you want to burn fat all the time.
Right.
Flexible metabolism means that you would like to burn fat when you are in a state of resting and fasting, for example, when you wake up in the morning. But at the same time, you want to burn more carbs when you're doing a high intensity workout, for example, or after eating a piece of cake. Then a healthy metabolism will shift to use more carbs because it burns the carbs I just ate for energy instead of store it as body fat. So when either if you want to lose weight or you want to live longer or to have a high energy level or to sleep better, all of these are rooted in how our metabolism is working. So you want to see both. You want to see fat burn in the morning and you want to see carb burn after, for example, having a high carb meal.
What Michal just actually described is metabolic flexibility, our body ability to shift between those two fuel sources, fat and carbs, depends on the energy availability and energy demand. And what today we know is that metabolic flexibility is highly associated not only with the ability to lose weight, but associated with different chronic disease, such as diabetic, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease. It also have, today we know, a direct impact on our lifespan and longevity.
I see, yeah.
And maybe it's worth mentioning that it's well known for years, but because there was not an easy measurement or accessible measurement to measure our metabolism on a daily basis, I mean, to measure our metabolism outside the lab, no one talked about it because how you can tell someone to manage his metabolism without giving him the tool to measure it, right? I mean, this is why most of us tracking after our health by standing on a scale and measure how much we weigh. But the correlation between weight and health are not exactly, it's not exactly one to one. 20% of people that on a healthy weight are not metabolically flexible. They are even in a high risk to develop diabetic or any other metabolic disorders.
Right. So to summarize what you've just said, so the metabolic flexibility is the ability to sort of oscillate at the right time in your day between using carbohydrates and using fats, depending on activity levels, your dietary intake, I'm guessing your blood glucose levels, your insulin resistance has to play a factor in here as well. Circadian rhythms, I would guess, which I'm all about in my next book. So this would all, be part and parcel of what does that mean to have good metabolic flexibility.
Yeah, a study we published, I think it was a year ago, we looked on people with high BMI versus people with a healthy BMI. And what we showed is that they differ in the metabolic flexibility. We actually measured, the response to meal that contain carbohydrate. And what we showed is that people, again, it's a population, but people with high BMI tend to have lower shift towards carbs oxidation versus people with a healthy BMI. It actually means that people with high BMI find it more difficult to take the carbs that they just consume and oxidize it for energy. So it means that their glucose will stay longer in their bloodstream, and in time they will develop pre-diabetic and diabetic. So again, this correlation association maybe between the metabolic flexibility and chronic disease is something that is well known for years.
Janine, what is the book you mentioned, the Circadian Rhythm, and the book that you are about to write?
Yes, it's soon to be launched in the next few weeks. Actually, it's called The Lost Medicine. So it's all about circadian rhythms and how we need to be and reconnect with nature. So because we are mammals, we are animals that we've completely disconnected. We're under artificial light. We have electromagnetic fields around us. So tying that all into how we can sort of reconnect with nature to be healthier again. And so, yeah, some of these topics, even, talking about metabolism and where people struggle, it's a disconnect, right? It's one thing, the foods that we eat, but there's a disconnect with our metabolism as to, what time of day it is. And, these are some of the topics that I talk about in the book. So,
Yes, I think that many people, tend to put the focus on nutrition, and they think that this is the only factor that affects their health and their ability to lose weight or whatever.
right.
And we see in our data that one of the main problem is usually that their circadian rhythm is not aligned, is not in sync. And when the circadian rhythm is basically in sync, it means that our metabolism will shift between burning carbs before going to bed, shift into burning more fat when we wake up.
Yeah.
And by holding those two measurements before bed and wake up in the morning, we are able to give insight on whether your circadian rhythm is in sync or not, and what the things that you can do, as you just mentioned, exposure to light, early dinner, in order to improve that metabolic shift during the overnight fast.
Oh,
So
that's so fascinating. Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll need to talk off camera, because that you could actually measure it with a device. That sort of mismatch between your internal circadian rhythms and what's going on with your environment. That I'm always fascinated, and I share a lot of tips in my book as to how seeing the sunrise and getting grounded and doing all these things, because it's not a dietary thing at that point, like you said, right? It's something that's more so connected with your disconnect with your environment. So yeah, okay, that's great. That's awesome. I'm glad to know.
I think that sometimes the root cause is the circadian rhythm, and we focus on the nutrition, but basically the craving that we are experiencing are like a butterfly effect of circadian rhythm, which is not in sync.
And
absolutely.
Stress is also something. We tend to forget that stress has a huge impact on our metabolism. And again, like Michal, everything is connected. But we find it sometimes very, we focus on nutrition and think this is the issue, that our willpower is not strong enough. But eventually, this is not willpower, eventually determined by our hormones. And like you cannot starve yourself to death. Why? Because eventually your willpower, it's fine that you want to do one thing, but eventually your hormones will
determine.
Yeah, they take over. Yeah.
They take over.
They do. Well, as women, we can say that too, right? We know that.
Exactly.
Women experience dramatic hormonal changes during their lives. And our metabolism definitely affected by nutrition, as we mentioned, and circadian rhythm and stress and movement. Yet, our hormones affect our metabolism, especially as women. That has a dramatic effect on our metabolism.
Which I know that's a great segue into my next question. I know that you've done some research now on menopausal women. Can you tell us a little bit about that study and what was discovered in terms of the hormones and metabolic flexibility?
Yeah, of course. First of all, I think just before I will share, we've been working on this study almost 3 years.
Wow.
And for a startup company to put so much effort on, research, it is not something very obvious. And Michal and myself, who founded Lumen like 10 years ago, women health and to understand women metabolism, this is something that for us was very, and still is, very exciting and important.
I think today the understanding of women metabolism, and I guess I'm not going to say anything new, right? I mean, we are lack of understanding. We know that metabolism is changed throughout the different phases of our lives, but we not quite understand how, because of the lack of the technology of being able to measure metabolism on a daily basis.
Yes,
And I
yes.
think this is why the guideline that women get on how they should eat, how they should train, how much sleep they should have based on those different stages of life are very limited. And most of the guideline we are taking from research that's done on men metabolism.
Of
And we
course.
are not small
We are
men.
not small men.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
And I think the last is that because of that lack of understanding, there is also lack of awareness. Many women experience premenopause symptoms, and because they're not aware that those are premenopause symptoms, they're not treating those symptoms, and those
Right.
symptoms are getting worse once we are getting into menopause.
Yes.
So for us, this is a topic that it was super important for us to put those 3 years, as Meravi mentioned, to bring light into that area. So Meravi, what are the study?
We need to do a build-up. Now
Yeah, no, that was
right.
amazing. Yeah,
The funny
no.
one.
Debatable.
So what we did, we explore two major phases in women's lives. Okay, so one is the phase of once we are still getting periods. So women who experience regular monthly cycle. And the second phase that we explored was women who was like in menopause. And what we find out is that, by the way, we analyzed data from about 5,000 female Lumen users.
Wow.
That, based on almost 500,000 metabolic measurements, just to get a little bit perspective, like overall in the world, beside Lumen, there's about like million and a half metabolic measurements. And so it's super, super exciting for us to be able to really to research metabolism in a way that was not available up to Lumen. So we track after metabolic changes on women who experience regular monthly cycle. And what we showed is that those women actually experience metabolic cyclic pattern. And this is the first time ever someone was able to show this pattern. If you take the monthly cycle of women and you divide it into two, separated by the ovulation, and you look on the first half, pre-ovulation, you see that we tend to rely more on carbs to produce energy. Actually, it indicates that we are less flexible, less metabolically flexible in the first half of the cycle. Versus the second half of the cycle, post-ovulation, we tend to rely much more on fat stores following an overnight sleep. So it indicates that we are much more flexible. Now, I think that the nicest thing is that when you try and correlate it in a discussion, okay, but what might be the reason to those metabolic changes? You see how nicely it correlates to progesterone changes during the monthly cycle. Really extremely interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
The second phase that we explored is, as you mentioned, women in the menopause. And what we showed is that women in menopause tend to rely much more on carbs oxidation. We lose the ability to be flexible. And it can explain weight gain, difficult, and to concentrate, be more tired during the day. Women in menopause that take hormonal replacement therapy actually tend to be much more flexible. So you can see, I wish I have like a pencil, but you can see, first of all,
we can show the
women
graph. Yeah.
Okay, so women in menopause, actually, they do two things. First of all, they don't have this metabolic cyclic pattern as women who experience monthly cycle do. And second thing, they tend to rely more on carbs versus once they take hormonal replacement therapy, they shift toward fat oxidation.
Wow.
And also, it's very, very interesting because you understand in hormonal replacement therapy, there's
one of the main hormone is progesterone. So you understand what might be the main player behind those metabolic changes.
Fascinating. Yeah, and I'm guessing that was traditional hormone replacement therapy, like, right?
Yeah.
Traditional, yeah. So it would be interesting, from my perspective as a naturopathic doctor, to see how herbal medicines, that can still stimulate progesterone and estrogen would be implicated in this as well. So maybe a future study again.
I totally with you. Yeah, maybe it make you think if maybe you can use it only to also to see how hormones actually affect us, and maybe it's like you can use it, for biofeedback, even for physicians, but definitely something to discuss and think about.
And it's important to say that those findings, are eventually outcomes to describe a big population. So it's an average of a whole population. It doesn't necessarily mean that each one of us behave exactly like that. So I, for example, I measure my metabolism for years, and in the first phase.
How do you measure your metabolism?
I'm reading to Lumen every day. And sometimes during the first phase of my monthly cycle, I tend to use more carbs, and sometimes not. And it's also, sometimes we feel those symptoms of craving, and sometimes we less. Even we are not all the time behave exactly the same, and definitely between two individuals are not behave exactly the same.
Right. So it's changeable. There's so many factors,
Changeable.
right? Yeah. There's so many but I think if you were to start measuring your own levels, you would become accustomed, if you're paying attention to your own sort of rhythms with your readings, that maybe you would start to make correlations for yourself, that stress was a factor, lack of sleep was a factor, hormones are out of whack for whatever reason is another factor. So I think that's great, especially for women, to be able to tune into, measuring and having some kind of like, oh, it's not all in my head. Like I am actually tired today, or I am actually not feeling great, or I was craving that chocolate or whatever because of these reasons. So I think it's great to be able to measure, and maybe it's an aspect of tuning into ourselves as women, because I think, as busy moms yourself, myself as well, I'm generalizing, of course, is that we take care of everyone else and we don't always focus in on what's happening with us. And everybody else suffers, right? If we're not doing well, then everybody else around us suffers. So I think that's a great tool as well to be able to use, your device, which is amazing. Okay, I do have a question about for someone who is trying to lose weight. I know we touched upon it a little bit at the beginning. Somebody who is trying to lose weight, they're struggling, they're new to your device and they start tracking. Like, do you have some little tips that they could, just to get started? What could they do? What could they do?
Yes, sure. First of all, Lumen is enable people to measure their metabolism, but by gathering the data around nutrition, movement, sleep, and mind, we are also providing those guidance and those insights and correlation that you mentioned. This is exactly how our engine, our smart engine, is working. But if I need, to give like one size fits all,
yeah.
So get a dog. Get a dog.
Get a dog.
Oh my goodness. So funny.
Let's take because weight loss is, it's a symptom. When someone is find it difficult to lose weight, it's an outcome of something that is not working. And for each one of us, it's different. Let's take, for example, menopause, that there are most of the people complaining about suddenly weight gain, although they are doing everything the same. They eat the same, they train exactly the same, but still. And here, I think that the main focus should be around our muscle mass. One of the things that happen during the menopause, even pre-menopause, is that we are much more sensitive to muscle breakdown.
Yes.
Now, our muscles are packed with mitochondria. Mitochondria are the powerhouse that sit inside our cells, right? When we are talking about metabolism, burn fat, burn carbs, who is doing the job? I mean, who is it, right? Those mitochondria, they are the one that takes fat, carbs, burn it with oxygen, and produce energy. So everything that we can do in order to be nice to our muscles, right? So it can be to focus or to part as our regular routine to do resistance training. We need to make sure that we eat enough carbs and protein. I know that many women try to do a low carb diet. It's not necessarily what we will gain from it the most.
Right.
Also, we need to make sure that when we are training, so we have enough carbs in our system. Otherwise, our body will break down muscles, convert it into carbs, and will provide that energy for the high intensity workout. So what I would focus on are muscles. Also, I think that people are in the weight loss area, women in the menopause should also focus about sleep. Another complaining is about sleep disorders.
Yes.
So here it's mainly around cortisol and insulin, right? So we find it hard to fall asleep. And one of the changes in our hormone causes to increase in cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone, which is it's an amazing hormone once it served us. For example, when I needed to perform or when I need to do a high intensity workout, so cortisol increase, it pushed my mitochondria to rely more on carbs. And that's a good thing because I need now quick and high energy. But during menopause, cortisol is constantly high. It means that our mitochondria constantly will rely on carbs and not on fat, for example, when I'm resting or in fasting. And eventually it will weaken the mitochondria because she will use not the right fuel at the right time.
Right.
So things like slow breathing technique or serotonin-rich food before going to bed will help to reduce cortisol. Also, not only that women in menopause find it hard to fall asleep, they also, once they are falling asleep, they all the time wake up during the night. So it also messes up with the circadian rhythm that we spoke about.
Yes,
so having before going to bed complex carbs with protein in order to provide steady and slow supply of carbs, of glucose to the blood during the night in order to avoid those drop in glucose level in the blood. This is what waking us up. So this is also something that we can do. So for improve our sleep disorders, we want to focus on cortisol and we want to focus on insulin sensitivity. And for not experience that weight gain, we would like to focus mostly in our muscle mass. Did I answer your questions? Because I can continue talking about
that's so many women need to hear that, I think, because I know a lot of women that I talk to. I mean, I've always lifted weights since like high school, and it's always just been a part of my life. Like I wouldn't think to not lift weights, but other women, they have a fear that they're going to get big and bulky or they're going to hurt themselves. And there's so many excuses, right? But at the same time, if you realize, and if you get into perimenopause and you get into menopause and you see that the muscle mass that, you once were able to just maintain, you didn't have to think about it. Now it starts to decline if you're not actively, being on top of your weight training. It's a game changer, right? So I think more women need, and it's something that I talk about on my social media all the time. Like, we've got to lift. You've got to. It doesn't. And there's mixed, research on if you have to lift heavy versus as long as you lift something, you have to maintain that muscle mass. It could be your kids. It could be anything, right? As long as you're lifting.
Or the dog.
Or the dog. The dog. Yes.
I'll stop. I promise.
That's so good. I love it.
Really, I think the first thing, when you want to lose weight, you go on a treadmill. But I think we should change this state of mind and start to do much more resistance
doing intermittent
exercise.
fasting. This is also something that women in their menopause, it's risky. I mean,
Intermittent
Yeah.
fasting is a great tool, but you need to know how to manage it and how to do it right. So
Yeah,
as long
exactly.
as your body shift toward using more fat, this is great. Your fasting is effective. At the
Yes.
moment that you see that your body is now shifted toward now using more carbs, this is the moment where you should stop your fast because now your
Yeah.
body is breaking down muscles.
Being in
And
a
yeah,
very
and you
moderate
wouldn't.
caloric deficit. Yeah, sorry.
Yes. Yeah, no, no, that's good because what I was going to say is that to be able to track that, because you know when you're successful, when you're tracking with the device, right? You know when you are being successful, you don't want to necessarily want to wait for the weight gain when you're doing your intermittent fasting to set on before you knew, right? Because you weren't tracking. So it's another way to look at it, which is amazing, something that I didn't think about before. So yeah, I educate women a lot too about intermittent fasting. And I often say do intermittent fasting. You don't want to necessarily do it all the time every day. And I prefer, I don't know what maybe you've been able to track in terms of the data on this, but skipping your dinner is always, in my opinion, based on circadian biology, it's more beneficial
Better.
than skipping the breakfast. Is that what you found in the
Yes,
data as well? Yeah.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
good, good. Okay, that's amazing.
You
That's
know,
so good.
the original idea of intermittent fasting comes in order to align your circadian rhythm. But over the year, people took it and abused the tool, and now it's about how many hours are you fast? I
Yes.
fast 16. I fast 18. I
Yeah.
fast 20 hours. It's like a competition around
Yeah.
how many hours I'm fast. It's not about the fasting, it's about the fasting window. So
Right.
it's really important when you fast. You want, as you said, an early dinner and overnight fast much more beneficial rather than eating into the night and now skip breakfast and
Yeah.
eating lunch
And
at
and
2
also you
p.m.
don't want to be into too much caloric deficit because otherwise, as Michal mentioned, also you will start to break down muscle, and this is the worst thing you need you can do to your body, especially
Right.
in menopause.
Right. Because yeah, the body just wants fuel at the end of the day, right? Those mitochondria, they need electrons. They need fuel. They're going to take it from somewhere. And I think a lot of women are actually guilty of doing, too strict caloric deficit, as you said, and it can really wreak havoc. The older you get too, I believe, based on you don't have the same type of flexibility with your metabolism as you once sort of took it for granted when you had great, progesterone and estrogen levels, like woohoo, like you take everything for granted. It's like so many things in life, right? Okay, so another question about the device and dietary recommendations. Like how does that all work? How has that worked into being able to not only measure your metabolic flexibility, but also, I know that you've made some improvements as well on the device in terms of, being able to scan your food now, I saw as well, which is amazing. Yeah. Tell us.
Right. So regarding dietary preference, basically the experience of Lumen is that you wake up and you take a measurement every day. Based on that measurement and based on other lifestyle data, we provide you with a daily nutrition plan. And the nutrition plan is changing from day to day. The idea is to give you the maximum amount of carbs while still you being able to wake up on fat burn. In addition, it's not only about those are the macro that you should eat today, because eventually people don't eat macro. People eat food, right?
Yeah.
So they need Lumen in order to help them apply it. So we provide you with meal recommendation that suits to your preference. So you're asking about allergies and what you like to eat, and either if you are vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, whatever. And in addition, we enable you different tools in order to being able to track after your daily budget. So as you mentioned, we just launched an image recognition and a voice recognition that you just take photos, or you can just set what you are just ate, and it
Wow.
automatically will translate into macro, and you will able to see your daily budget based on that.
That's so helpful, I think, for so many people. Because I think a lot of people, and women as well, they believe that they think they know what they're doing when it comes to diet, but then, unless they're like, somebody like the two of you who've studied physiology, or myself who has, a medical background, that like we really look at I do, I don't know, I'm speaking from my own personal, but I really look like, oh, that's a carbohydrate. I try to teach my kids as well. That's a carbohydrate. That's healthy fats. That's, because they have no concept. It's not something, they learn it in school, but it's not the way that we would, I would imagine that we would teach our children about the macros. So to actually be able to track that with the device and have it sort of figured out for you, that's amazing to me.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good point what you just mentioned, because it's not only, scan it and be able to track, but it provides you education, because the moment you scan something and you are able to see what it really contains, slowly you understand that pizza is not a vegetable because of the tomato on it. It actually contains a lot of fat.
Yes.
No, it's really, when we just started, sometimes you're in a certain bubble, because you think that everybody know what you know, but more and more you speak to consumers and you understand that there's a huge gap between what they really understand, like the macro of different meals, and even once they think something is healthy because the package is in green, it doesn't mean it's a healthy food. Green package doesn't mean healthy food.
Right.
And even me, when I see all kind of commercials in TV, sometimes I find myself, wow, this chocolate, this sounds very healthy, because they're so contains a lot of calcium.
Yeah, I heard something the other day which was so fascinating and funny at the same time. It's like, if it's a food, if it needs a commercial, it's probably not good for you. Right? If it needs a commercial, if they have to sell it, it's probably not healthy. So it makes sense, right? If you think about a lot of things that we may see advertised.
I will use this sentence with my kids.
Yeah, right? I know. Because the kids, that's where they're influenced so easily. Okay, that is actually, I have another question though. Can we use this for children?
Oh, it's a great and amazing question. So currently not. But because we need to, the sensors are not sensitive enough for the flow of children. But this is definitely in our roadmap. Currently, it's for age 16 and above.
Okay.
But I feel that, eventually, if we want to fix the problem of metabolic health, and this is why we are here for 15 years, we need to fix it from the root cause. Not hurry up. I don't want to have a podcast like 5 years forward, another 20 years. We are still here struggling. We need to educate children.
Yes.
To help. Because eventually, when you look on interventions, the ability to have a better success is once you are able to do the intervention inside the family. Yeah. So if I can speak only for my behalf, but if I want to change something in my routine, but eventually my spouse will keep with his behavior, and the kids, I will keep making them like food that is less good for their health. It will make it will maybe risk my success. So I think if we understand that the intervention is more of a family, and it will increase the success of each one of the members, especially education, right? When kids see their mom or their dad, and you can support each other. Same as Michal and I support each other.
Yes.
So I love you. Right? We launched, for example, a duo of like two users on the same device. And the reason for that is because we know that when people are taking a journey together, the chances to success with that journey are much higher.
Absolutely.
And we see it on our own.
Yes. Wow. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. What you can do together, it's you need the support, right? At the end of the day. we need
We need
each other's
the
support.
ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I'm all about educating children. I think they are the future. And I know that that's, a pun or whatever. It's a phrase that's coined, but it's important that I find that anybody, a child or adult, if once they understand, that's why I do so much educating on social media, right? Once they understand if there's a reason behind why certain things are better for you versus others, then if you make that connection, they're like, okay, that makes sense. Then there's more of an impetus to be able to follow through for yourself. At the end of the day, we have to do it for ourselves, right? We have to take care of ourselves, and hopefully we can instill that in our children as well by educating them to make better choices and, choosing the healthier foods. It's not always going to happen. I believe there has to be, a little bubble of fun around food as well. But that being said, hopefully we can instill upon them the better choices to be made.
This is so nice to hear you saying that.
We were just talking about it like a few days ago. The ability of Lumen, what we really want is to empower people to take smarter decisions. The fact once they are able to measure something and then understand and connect the dots for them, okay, this is what I did, this is what happened, and because you cannot cover all the scenario. One, like in kids, right? You teach them, you educate them, and then at a certain point you say, okay, I provide you the tools, now you go ahead on your own. And in a sense, I think Michal and I look on our consumers similar to that. We are here, not as kids, but to provide them the tools, the education, and then they can manage and take smarter decisions on their own. And like you've said, sometimes, okay, it's everybody, but who doesn't like to have like ice cream, pizza? It's fun, but then you need maybe to manage the other, like to balance it with other stuff that you do.
Absolutely. Well, that's it's a holistic way of looking at life, I think, and diet and exercise and everything always in moderation. I think that's always been my motto, because if you and I've seen people, my patients as well over the years, if you go too extreme in one direction, it never turns out well. It doesn't, right? Because there's a reason why people go to extremes as well. So, Anyway, well, just some great thoughts that we've shared today, and I appreciate the time that you took to speak with me. I know we're in completely different time zones, and you took time away from your families and your children, and I truly appreciate everything that you've done as women as well as entrepreneurs. Please keep it up, and don't get tired of doing everything that you do every day. We all appreciate you so much. Thank you so much, and I hope to speak with you again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.